just share some just little nuggets of insights around weaning, as I promised that we would be doing. So you would have seen Sammy and my chat that we had about the oral development around weaning. And so what I would really love to do is just to give you a few little tips that can just help you further in your weaning journey, specifically around how to develop such a healthy relationship around food, and in the idea that we want to try and minimize and hopefully prevent very picky or fussy eating down the line. And so I want to just help you a little bit with your expectations going forward. So most of you have gone on this weaning journey. You've started, you've introduced the solids, you've recognized that your babies have different sensory personalities, you've weaned appropriately, you're reading your baby's cues, and you're doing all of that. So now, going forward, you're going to start becoming a bit more adventurous around foods that you're introducing. We hope that you already are adventurous with regards to that. And it's all very exciting as they taste and explore food in different ways. But there comes a time, and it often happens around about 10 months, when your baby starts to develop their own little likes and dislikes. So foods that they were seemingly happy to take, they might suddenly start avoiding. And this can be quite stressful because you have this idea that your baby's got to eat this volume of food 3 times a day. Then you're starting with snacks in between, and it can become a little bit scary when your baby eats less or starts to reject food that they previously did eat. Now, how you manage this initially is going to have a long-term impact with regards to how your baby sees the relationship around food and yourself and his or her connection. And so I just want to give you a few little pointers when it comes to that. Firstly, remember that babies have good days, they have bad days. They have on days, they have off days, just like you and me. You have times when you don't feel like eating the same volume of food that you maybe ate the day before. Some days you are super hungry and you're wanting to eat a lot more if you've been more physically active. Babies have that as well. So some days they're more active, they want more food. Some days they are growing, so they need more food. And this is all quite normal. But then they also have days when they are not feeling great or they're feeling a bit miserable. And sometimes they lose the appetite before the symptoms of a cold come out. They can't tell you, Mom, I woke up this morning with a sore throat, but they will tell you indirectly by not wanting to eat as much as what they ate the day before. Or they might have a sore ear. Babies who struggle with a bit of a earache don't want to eat. Or they might be feeling a bit yucky, and the next minute you realize they haven't eaten breakfast, they haven't eaten lunch. You wonder what's going on. Do they not like your food? Did you cook it wrong? And actually what's happened is they've got a little bug, and the next minute you have a dirty nappy or they vomit, and then you realize, oh, that's what it was about. I often have parents contact me and say, oh, my baby hasn't eaten for 3 days, so he's not wanting to eat and I'm worried, and what should I do? And then I get back to the mom and she's, oh, I actually took my baby to the doctor and he had a sore throat or he had an ear infection or something like that. So often there's an underlying reason why they won't want to eat. So you don't dive into it and panic immediately. Okay, step back. So we say take a pause, watch and observe your baby, watch what's going on. And then when you've made a decision calmly, then you can engage. Force feeding is never a good means of engagement, okay? You can never force a baby to eat. And if you get that right now, you're going to have a lot less toddler battles going forward. So those are the types of things that you might notice in the first year of weaning. So up until a year, you'll notice that kind of back and forth. Some days great, some days maybe not as great. Some days they love the food, some days they don't, and you need to go with that. It's the ebb and flow. Go with it, and your baby generally will take in what they need to take in if they have a food available to them. Then as you reach the going into that toddler year, your baby's taste buds start to change. So from 10 months onwards, your baby starts to develop more sophisticated taste buds and a bigger number of taste buds, especially on the bitter part of the tongue and where the bitter taste buds are situated. And what happens is that they start to taste those bitter flavors which are found in vegetables. And unfortunately, this could put a baby who was a great broccoli eater totally off broccoli, because now they realized broccoli was not what they thought it was. It's actually quite bitter. And this can be a challenge, and especially your slow to warm up babies and your sensitive babies. Your easygoing babies, they kind of ride through that challenge. They might go a bit off it, but they might not totally give up on it. And your social butterfly, if the environment's right and the atmosphere is great, they probably will continue to eat that. But your slow to warm up baby might see broccoli as a totally new food, even though it was cooked in the same way that it had been done in the past. But now the taste buds have suddenly developed, and they realize in this whole experience. And the sensory baby picks up on it because they're so sensitive. So be aware of that, and don't take it personally. Don't take it that they no longer want to eat your food. A lot of reason why they eat a lot of the commercially bought food is that a lot of the commercially bought food is less flavorsome. It's less tasty in some, flavorsome, tasty, same thing. So kind of not as pronounced. So when these taste buds explode, you often find that they gravitate more towards your kind of ready-made meals. And their textures tend to be a little bit more consistent than what ours are. So ours are changing, and especially your slow to warm up baby, as we know, it doesn't like that change. So be careful of resorting to that too much, because given time, your baby will get used to those flavors and those tastes. So that's another factor. Okay, so we've got the first factor is that we have the good days, the up and the down. And then the second factor is that the taste buds, there's an explosion of new taste bud development. And then the third factor is that from a year, the growth slows down exponentially. And it's quite dramatic. So if you think about your baby born, let's say a baby's born 3 kilograms. And let's say by a year, your baby's 9 kilograms. Some babies will be a bit bigger, some babies a little bit smaller, but let's say. So that's a 3-fold increase. So if you do the math and your baby continues to grow at the rate they grew in that first year, so if they start off the second year at 9 kilograms, if you do a 3-fold increase, that'll be 27 kilograms by the end of their second year. And then if you brought that baby to me and I plotted your baby, I would tell you your baby is a bit overweight. If you take that baby at the beginning of their third year, 27 kilograms, and you multiply that by 3, you can do the math. That's like 81 kilograms at the age of 3 years old. Now, you're all going, oh, that's ridiculous. There's no baby. And we hope that there is no child at 3 years old weighing 81 kilograms. And if there is, that child probably has some really problematic thing going on. So if they continue to grow at that, you can continue to do the math. I'm not going to try it without a calculator, but if you start the third year at 81 kilograms, multiply that by 3, what age will they be at 4, etc., etc. And if you carry on that, by the age of 7, I worked it out the other day, it's about 6,000 kilograms a child would weigh at the age of 7, if they continue to grow at the rate they grew in their first year. And you might think I'm being a bit ridiculous, but as parents, we almost expect that, because that is a lot where our fussy eating and our picky eating problems come in, is that we continue to expect the same appetite and food desire that they have in their first year. And that actually totally decreases and wanes between the age of 1 year old and 7 years old. It then starts to pick up again as they're now starting to go into pre-puberty, and there's a whole different cycle of growth that starts to happen. And it's during this year between age 1 and age 7 that your baby then will slow down. Your baby then becoming a toddler, becoming a child, will then slow down their focus around food and eating. They will eat small portions. They will eat frequently. They won't sit for a long period of time because they've got other areas now that are taking their focus of development, and their growth slows down dramatically so that we don't get that exponential weight gain and growth that I was mentioning earlier on. So it is very, very normal behavior for your child's appetite to look like it has literally gone AWOL. And that's why we coined the term toddlers live on air. And they have so much energy. We don't know how they keep going. There was a very famous athlete who tried to mimic for an hour his toddler, and he actually couldn't keep up with his toddler, with what his toddler was doing in that hour. And he was extremely fit, this dad. So their energy level is exponentially high. Their appetite is exponentially low. Their growth is literally slowed down dramatically from where it was. And we like suddenly hit this brick wall going, but you did so well, you ate so well. And this has happened. So that is an explanation of why they don't eat the volumes that we perceived they would eat if we kept increasing volumes like we did in their first year of life. So that's the third thing. Okay, so just to recap, the first thing is that they're going to have some great days of eating and some poor days of eating. If they're not feeling 100%, they're not going to eat 100%. Very normal. Teething happens, they don't want to eat. They're feeling sick, they don't want to eat. Just like us, if we're not on top form, we might not feel like eating. And then the second thing is that the taste buds explode and there's new taste buds, and that's like overwhelming the baby's senses. And then the third thing is that growth slows down dramatically. The metabolism literally quietens down, and the focus is on development in other areas now and not just the food. And then the fourth thing is that your baby starts to develop a little personality, in the sense, and an ego of who I am, I'm me, and suddenly the world is revolving around me and what I want, and I'm trying to figure out my likes and dislikes. I'm trying to separate from my mother, and I'm trying to develop a place where I can assert my will, because that's going to give me a stronger persona. Who am I? And they do this through food, and especially if you as mom or dad are so intent on trying to feed them, you will find that they will continue to push that boundary more and more, and continue to try and figure out what they can and can't do around food, and what role they have and what say they have. And what you can do around this stage is to really be strict with defining the roles of responsibility. Toddlers need boundaries, but they do push boundaries, and they push them until they realize that's where the boundary is, and then they stop. But the problem is, if we keep moving the boundary further and further, they're going to keep pushing it. So when it comes to eating, you need to make sure that that responsibility is understood. Your responsibility as the parent is what they are going to eat, when they're going to eat, where they're going to eat. Their responsibility then will be how much they eat. Often what happens in the toddler phase is because we think they need to eat so much food and we don't understand why they're not eating the broccoli like they used to, we tend to switch the responsibility to us deciding how much they must eat. Eat all the broccoli on your plate, eat all your vegetables, versus them deciding that, but us presenting them with the food that we feel. So we then give them the responsibility of where they want to eat. So we run around the whole house trying to feed them. We give them the responsibility of when they're going to eat. So we are a short order cook, cooking food the whole day. Whenever they throw a tantrum or want food, we just there to give the food. So the whole day our mind is on food, and it becomes so exhausting. So then when eventually we put the food down in front of them and they say they don't want it, we literally create this tension, and it becomes fraught with a lot of anxiety, tension, and just horrible feelings around the whole food environment. But if you put responsibility in the right place, in other words, you decide when they're going to eat, because there's routine is so important for toddlers. So eating happens around 8 o'clock in the morning is breakfast, a snack at 10, a little lunch at 12, a little snack in the mid-afternoon, and a little supper at 6 o'clock. And if you plan that and it's consistent every day, within give or take a half an hour or so, it's going to allow your toddler's body to know when they can and can't expect food, and it's going to allow you to have designated times of making food available, not more than half an hour. And then there's 1.5 hours where there is no food available, where they actually don't have access to food. And in that time, You play with your toddler, you play with your child, you interact on totally different levels that are not food related. Should your child or toddler in that time wish to then request food, you are then going to, at that point, say you can have it at snack time. So you always know every 2 hours there are going to be opportunities for your child to eat. So if they eat nothing at breakfast, you can relax, because at 10 o'clock they're going to have another whole opportunity to eat again. And you're going to start being able to allow your toddler to listen to their body and what they need when. And then the other area of responsibility, which is very important, is where. So it doesn't have to be sitting in a high chair, sitting at a table. It can be sitting on your lap. It can be sitting on a little mat playing. It can be in any other position, but you are going to designate it. So if your little one becomes busier, which they're going to become, as you're going to notice quite soon, you might need a little bit of distraction around eating, because eating is not the biggest fun and priority. And after the kind of novelty of the food has worn off, then they want to move on to the next activity. So as long as you demarcate an area, it can be a little playroom area. It doesn't have to be a confined, restricted space. But within that space, that's where they eat. If they leave that space, you're going to look at them and say, okay, that means you're full, that means you're done, and you're going to move them then out of the space, but then eating is done. They cannot come back into the space. So once they leave the eating space, it is done. And that's why I suggest a room as an eating space. And then the third area of responsibility, which is very important, is what they're going to eat. Now you're going to set them up to, and every mealtime needs to include foods that they enjoy. And that is really, really important. Even when introducing new foods, they still need to have foods that they enjoy within the context of the meal. It's like you being starving and going to have been in a foreign country and me feeding you something you've never seen, you've never smelled, you've never touched before, and telling you you have to eat that. That's just mean. So you need to have food that they love, and then you can bring in the more challenging foods, one of them maybe per meal, and use your early part of the day, breakfast time, mid-morning snack, lunchtime, to do the more challenging foods, and leave your afternoon snack and your evening meal to be much easier foods. And that's something to take into consideration even now as you are in the process of weaning your babies. And it's really important that you always are setting your children and your babies up to win when it comes to feeding. So don't make it difficult for yourself. Introduce new food actually even on your plate, even out of the context of their meal time, so that it's totally non-threatening. They love to eat from you and interact with you around food introduction. And that's a lovely way to introduce new foods. It doesn't have to be out of a bowl with a spoon and in their mouth. Give them their tried and tested foods that way, but the new foods introduced in a much more less threatening way. So those are your areas of responsibility: what, when, and where. And then the area of responsibility that is your babies, your toddlers, your child, is how much they eat. And it's the same. You have that area of responsibility in your life, and you would hate it if I came up to you and said, you will eat this much food. We don't think that's healthy. It doesn't create a healthy attitude towards food. It doesn't create a intuitive way of eating. It doesn't allow you to listen to your body. You have to trust your baby's body and trust your child. If you have the other responsibilities in place, in other words, they've got opportunities regularly to eat, they've got good healthy food that they enjoy available at each of those opportunities, and the environment is conducive to feeding. So you're not on your phone, there's not lots of activity going on, not lots of noise, you're focused, engaged with your child in the eating environment. They will then eat what they need to eat at that time. And that's really important for you. So the reason I wanted to give you this information now is I'm finding more and more parents come to me when their child's in such a bad way with picky and fussy eating that I wish I would have access to have spoken to them about this in the early part of their weaning journey. So I want you to start thinking along these lines as you get deeper and deeper into the weaning journey, and as you get closer to 10 months to a year of your child's life. Know what you're going to be expecting, and this is going to take a lot of the pressure off you. Okay, so those are the 4 aspects, and then the 5th aspect is keep it fun, keep it relational, keep it social, because that will keep your child engaged, excited, and enjoying the feeding environment. So that is really important. Remember that food needs to be fun, it needs to be enjoyable, and it doesn't need to be stressful. So keep the fun elements in it. And if it's not fun anymore, stop, stand back, observe what's going on, make some changes, and go back into a fun way of eating. And if that for a while means serving the favorite meal for breakfast, lunch, and supper, just so that you can bring the fun back into eating, then that's what you do. Okay, we do not want you to be having a terrible experience along this food journey, because it's not going to set your child up for a happy feeder down the line. And it's just going to make it so much more unpleasant for you. So just to recap, the first aspect that you need to, just from an expectation point of view in managing, is that your child's going to have days where it's going to want to eat more and days where it's going to want to eat less. Days when she's going to be teething and uncomfortable, and days when he's going to be feeling a bit yucky and not want to eat as much. Days when he's going to want lots more food, and that's cool. It's not a reflection on your parenting. It's not a reflection on you and your cooking skills or on something you've done wrong. It's just what happens, and allow for that ebb and flow and those moments to happen. The second thing is that between 10 months to a year, your child's taste buds are going to change. There's going to be an explosion of them. The bitter taste buds are going to rear their heads. Vegetables are going to have a different flavor to what they had initially for your baby, and you can expect some changes with regards to their likes and dislikes. Then the third thing is that your baby is not going to continue to grow exponentially, because we're not going to have a 6,000 kilogram 7-year-old walking around your house. So your baby's growth rate is going to dramatically take a much slower process from a year onwards, and you need to allow for that. So that means that they are going to need to eat a lot less per square meter than what they used to do. So it's going to feel like there's no progress being made, because as a baby you were going from a little amount to a bit bigger, a bit bigger, a bit bigger, a bit bigger, and then suddenly you go back to a smaller amount and you're like, what's happening here? And like I say, that's why we coined the term toddlers live on air. And then the fourth thing is that your little toddler begins to develop an identity and an ego, and it's very important for development. So the world revolves around him or her, and your little one wants to assert their will, and one amazing place to assert their will is in food, because they know how much that means to you. They just know. It's like this unspoken thing that toddlers have, that they know that it's so amazing when they eat, their mother feels like she has accomplished the world, and they get this. So don't let them rule with this and manipulate with this. Okay, so you need to maintain your areas of responsibility, what, when, and where your child eats, and you'll leave the responsibility of how much they eat with your child. That's going to make it much more pleasant. And that brings me to the final point, is keep this journey fun, keep it light-hearted, relax in it, be good enough. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to turn your child into this amazing nutritional biology of green smoothies and weird things. Your child will be fine. Your child will survive. Longevity in this world is exponentially way more than it used to be years and years ago, decades ago. So we are doing a good job. And I think you need to just relax in it, rest in that, and make sure that the journey is fun. If it stops being fun, or if any of these things concern you, just take a moment to pause, breathe, observe, and then see what you can do and engage and just make it fun. It's been so awesome to do this journey with you. I've got one more webinar I'll be recording on Wednesday for you, and then we're going to be posting all of these. Thank you so much.